18th of April 2011. It is my pleasure.
Good evening.
And welcome to our first meeting for 2011. I think it's the 21st of March, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce Norm Beaurteaux, who has been a friend of mine for many, many years. He's been involved in sailing. He's been involved, I think, as everybody got from their newsletter. Norm, his father was the person in charge of the signals at Rottnest Island, and Norm, as a boy, started, I think, probably started school in Fremantle, but then his father got transferred to Rottnest Island. So Norm went over there and spent many years growing up on the island, and I think he's got a few things to tell us about his growing up in Fremantle and Rottnest. So Norm, it's over to you, and welcome.
Thanks, Terry. Good evening, everybody, and thanks for the opportunity. This is the first time I've done this, so bear with me. I was born on January 12th, 1927 at number 3 Suffolk Street, Fremantle, near the old seawall, which has been since demolished. That was opposite my father's birthplace at number 1 in 1902, and his building still stands today, if I can find it. That one there.
So that's number 1 Suffolk.
That's number 1. Well, this one is number 1. It's sort of semi-detached. That there wasn't there. That's been put on since.
Is it still a private residence?
Pardon?
Is it still a private residence?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, I think this Italian lady lives in it now. But at that time, my great-grandmother lived there, and her seafaring husband, who was Captain Charles Gramke, and he used to skip her a boat to go up the northwest taking stores. Unfortunately, there was a big storm one time when she went, and that was the last they heard of the boat or him. No, there's no records since then. What's just going on? During his childhood days and later as he grew up, my father William, or Bill, as he was known, learnt many things about the sea and ships. Got a bit of light. The sea and ships. And he's very good with his hands at all kinds of tasks, which he then passed on to his children. Bill gained employment with the Fremantle Harbour Trust, now the Fremantle Port Authority, and stayed in that service for 49 years on the pilot boats, doctors' boats and other craft, becoming senior coxswain when he retired 49 years later. It was during this early 20s that Dad married Alice Bolt from Kalgoorlie. I come along in 1927, and just when he was putting the finishing touches to his house, he was building it in Bicton at number 31, which is now numbered 2119 Preston Point Road, near the old Bicton racecourse. Having almost completed his dream home, Bill was offered a posting of employment as a signalman at the Rottnest signal station. To facilitate this and have their new home looked after, Mum and Dad decided to invite some of their in-laws to house sit while everybody was settling in it. While everybody was settling in at number 31, our family was lucky enough to be giving use of one of the Harbour Trust houses on the South Mole. Now, the Harbour Trust owned 5 semi-detached houses. A bit hard to find this, Terry. I'll find it later. It's in amongst these.
Okay, you keep going.
Might be that one. They owned 5 semi-detached houses, which the people who worked for the trust had temporary accommodation while they were shifting for different duties of employment. Incidentally, the four walls of my parents' house with its 11-foot-6 ceilings is still standing today and is incorporated in my niece's new home. The moulds that made the bricks one at a time, he made a big mould like this with two frogs, the holes that go down the middle in it, one at a time. I took out to the Melville Council because they wanted them for their Heritage Society. I also took out a mould that I had when I built. I made 22,000 bricks for my home too. The trust houses, some 5 that Terry's looking for, were built at the foot of the South Mole on the top of the cliff face.
So that's the photo you're
It's very hard to see. The South Mole's running out. If you want to pass it round, you can have a look.
Yep.
At the foot of the South Mole there was a cliff face that dropped off, below which ran the government slipway, which was wooden. And the other tenants were Dick Muse and family. He was an engineer. Ourselves, the White family, a chap called Lou Hopkins and family, and another tenant which I can't recall his name. Then parallel to the north was the Forest Landing, and that's, say this is the North Mole, and you've got to go that way out to the wharf, and that was the Forest Landing where the pilot boat came in. Mum always worried when I and my sister Joyce and younger brother Ken played out the front of the house because the cliff dropped off about 30 feet to a slipway and there was nothing there to stop you going over the edge. These, I'll leave that bit out. Those houses, as you probably know, have since been demolished. On the southern or back side of the houses was a large limestone pave area comprising the foot of the South Mole. The mole ran out into this huge limestone area, which in winter time created huge puddles. And we had great time as kids making and sailing these puddle boats. I just made one up to show you, with a paper sail. We also played a game called Tip Cat. Anybody heard of it? You have? I don't know how to score, but what you do, you put that on the ground and you hit that like that, and when it comes up you've got to whack it as far as you can. But I can't remember how we scored.
Too sophisticated, bro.
Pardon? Too sophisticated. Incidentally, when my own son came along, I made one of these, only more sophisticated, with a little dagger board in it and a cloth sail and everything. And they go like the wind, as Terry knows. It was during our preceding stay at Rottnest that Dad decided to have a 17-foot clinker sailing boat built. He didn't have the time or the facilities to do so at this stage, but he was quite capable of doing it. He employed a boat builder out in Clontarf Road, Hamilton Hill. And I can remember going out to the construction. The boat shed was in the middle of a market garden. And it was to be a centreboard boat and rigged with a lug sail, which was easy to use. Anybody familiar with sails? You know what a lug sail is?
Well, I just remember seeing one.
Pardon?
I just remember seeing one.
You remember seeing one?
An old-fashioned one.
Yeah, it's got a traveller goes round the mast. One halyard pulls the lot. Yeah. They always carried a 10-foot oar on the boat in case the wind dropped and we had to scull it. We were never short of fish or crayfish due to the capabilities of this boat and the skipper. As a child I learnt much about shipping and the vessels and all types of mostly coal burners, some of them under sail, several old sailing ships still in the harbour, one called the Samuel Plimsoll, were now being used as coal hulks, the bulk of the steamship, bunk of the steamships. Sadly, these hulks were taken out to sea and scuttled, and that's history down the drain, isn't it? The fishing boat harbour was small, with all boats on moorings, and it was not uncommon during the winter gales one would break away from its mooring in a nor'wester and blow ashore on the stone groin that used to run from Fremantle out to South Beach. And consequently it didn't do it much good. There was a short granite groin to the southwest of the fishing boat harbour, which gave some protection, but not enough. At the shore end of this groin, in the summertime, there was an Italian family who had a sweet shop in High Street. They would set up a caravan and sell ice cream, etc. down at the beach. His name was Sylvie Reel. The sweet shop was a magic for kids, and one of the most interesting sweets was large strips of shredded coconut, which was all colours and flavours. Of course, these days the old boiled lollies were the order of the day there too. High Street at that time was still comprised of the old Jarrah blocks, bitumenised over the top, and stayed that way for some years to come. As our child time in Fremantle was short and rewarding, in 1933 I started my first year at school at the South Terrace Primary School on the corner of Alma Street and South Terrace, later to become the new wing of the Fremantle Hospital. Not long after, I found a great schoolmate in Royce Gray, the son of the police sergeant Gray, and they lived in a house on Arthur's Head just over the road from us. Royce and I had great fun in our free time, making these sailing boats and playing the tip-cat game. Quite often marbles with large steel balls from ball bearings. A demonstration model is available, I've told you that. Large mussels could be harvested from the nearby wooden slipways at the wharf and around the Navy ship slipyard in the fishing boat harbour. We also caught octopus and all sorts of shells from the reef area. Then we would light a fire on the beach and cook up these mussels in empty fruit tins and the like. And that made good tucker for us. The large piles of sandalwood logs cut from the bush, stacked for shipment to the Orient, were almost on our doorstep. They ran at the end of the houses. It was mainly used for making joss sticks and incense. Incidentally, my mother as a child, when she lived in Kalgoorlie, gathered sandalwood to make a bit of pocket money. At this time, Fremantle Port tide gauge was housed in the cliff face not far from the house, and it entered the water through the cliff down into a cave, and we could access that from the beach below. On the top of the cliff was a little building with a corrugated iron roof that housed the instruments for the tide gauge. We never got inside to see what it was. Another interesting procedure at Fremantle was firing the 12 o'clock signal at the port headquarters. When a cannon of some sort went off every day at precisely 12 noon, and a black cane basket shot up the mast, which was clearly visible. And there's a photo of that still here, the old photo. There was another prank boys used to get up to at times, and that was gathering crayfish tails. In the early days, the crayfish were small boats, wooden planked, about 30 to 35 foot long, and onto the plank sheathing of the hull was built a well, which was then they perforated the hull with about inch diameter holes, and the seawater moved all through this, so that when they caught their crays, they dumped them straight in here and they kept alive. But at that time, they used a small cane beehive pots made out, well, it was either made out of cane or tea tree, and it wasn't very deep to pull it because all the pulling of the pots was done by hand. Getting back to the boys' crayfish antics, the fishermen would bring their catch to the markets, and the old fish markets near City Beach, as we call it, not Bathers Beach. At the markets, they were kept alive in large slatted wooden crates about 12 foot long, a couple of feet deep, and they had these slats about that far apart. In some instances, the slats were wide enough apart for some of the boys to swim around, dive down unnoticed, and pull a tail or two through the slot. Mind you, the crayfish were very cheap in those days. As you might remember, people bought them for bait. I must make mention of a yacht called the Genesta. It was a large vessel, sloop rig, that was moored at the northern end of the South Mole. Now, I don't know how they got permission to moor it there, but it was there all the time. We were there for 12 months anyway, on a mooring. And our friend of our neighbours next door, one of the boys, Buddy Muse, whose father was the engineer on the pilot boat, used to look after that vessel. Also from the backyard was the wreck of the ship the Lignern, which was blown ashore onto a bank in a storm, which was, I suppose it'd be about south-west of the houses. People here, anybody remember the Lignern?
Remember the name?
Yeah, been on it. Yeah. Well, the Lignern was there after we came back until when war started. The army used it for target practice and blew it all up, but they left a few bits around that a few boats got caught on, and where they had them in and spit to so tell you it was there, but it's since been cleared up. Dad used to tell me that they tried to get it off the bank, they couldn't pull it off. Around the Christmas of 1933, the family had to make the move to Rottnest aboard the Ivanhoe. Anybody know the Ivanhoe? The Ivanhoe was built in Fremantle by Brown Brothers. It was a wooden plank vessel, steam. It was used to take the doctor out to the ships. Every ship coming into port had to be cleared by the doctor. The Ivanhoe was pretty slow and heavy and was used to ferry the doctors to the shipping. All overseas vessels had to be boarded. The Rottnest signal station sometime later, I and my sister Joyce commenced school in the single room school in 1934, and I've got photos of that in these. People like to go through the several photos there. And most of the kids I know still a name on the back. There's a blank sheet with names on it. The school went from first standard to standard 8th. Incidentally, the girl, Barbara Pierce, who was the butcher's daughter, was in standard 8, and she did work at the school, plus she did correspondence under the teacher. My young brother Ken had some time to go before commencing school, but I clearly remember the day when Dad dragged him from our house over the road, because the house was there and the road was here, the school was there, just over the road, to the school. While Dad was looking and talking to Mr. Spawn, the teacher, who incidentally was French too, Ken was off back home, and he was home before Dad got there. So it took a while before we got him back to school. In our time at Rottnest, the signal station was in a similar position to the old one from the 1800s to the 1920s, which are photos of it here somewhere. Can you find them, Terry? Where the signal station was, because there's nothing there at the moment, the signal station was directly west of the lighthouse on the top, on the high point, and just down to the south was what they call the rocket house, which was a cylindrical building about 8 foot diameter, and this rocket house was used to fire flares or rockets off to warn ships if they got too close to the shore. Dad always kept a large torch on the job and at times used it to transmit Morse signals to shipping by day, and there was a heliograph there, by night I should say. By day there was a heliograph there to transmit messages. As we all grew up there, we got to know the residents. Dad became very popular with the newly made friends, including many new residential army officers that were over there just preceding the war. The general manager of the island at that time was Mr. Stark Senior. He lived in one of the stone cottages on the seafront. I suppose most of you have been to Rottnest, where the settlement is, the main office. He lived just north of that, along a row of stone cottages. Quite a few trusts and other employees, including a Mrs. Glass, who taught Sunday school for all us kids to go to. Her husband was the senior signalman for the Harbour Trust. Our house was on the northern end of these cottages, almost opposite the old pilot boat house, which was really two-storey. The house was built level with the road up top, and down below as it ran down to the water was another building underneath. That was the pilot boat house. And the pilot boat used to be a wooden plank boat that had to be rolled down to the water on wooden rollers and rowed to sea when necessary. We quickly made friends with other children at Rottnest, employees, the baker Mr. Tickle, the butcher Mr. Pearce, and general manager Mr. Wilkes, and many others. Dad also got to know many of the army personnel. It was not until some time later that Dad's new boat was finished. He then went back to Fremantle and sailed it home to Rottnest. From then on, he moored it at a small jetty. At the base of the old pilot boat, there was a small jetty. He moored down there. That jetty, I would say, is now under the new stone groin of the Rottnest ferries. I think I mentioned Dad's boat before. It was rigged fisherman style with the old Vauxhall. As time went by, Dad and I did a lot of exploration of Rottnest shoreline, getting to know what was what and where it was. Time was endless for children, with swimming, fishing, walking the beaches, discovering all sorts of shells, fishing in rock pools, and finding any number of different kinds of sea creatures in the pristine environment, which is a bit different at the moment. Very few boats had motors. It was sail or row everywhere. I remember the day I found a very large hermit crab. In fact, the curator of the Perth Museum, a Mr. Glorett, got to know about it. He said it was the largest one he had seen and asked me for the specimen for museum use. Whether it's still there, I don't know. In those days, it was customary for people from the mainland to keep a pair of seagulls in their garden. Anybody remember that? Fremantle? Yes. To combat the small white snails that were very prevalent in coastal areas. One wing would be trimmed like you do with a chook, so the birds couldn't fly, but they were okay. At a certain time of the year, children would go out to Green Island after the chicks. You know where Green Island is? No? Well, Rottnest, if you go straight west, Green Island's just about due south of the main lighthouse. It's only a small island, and it was a place where lots of birds nested. After the chicks hatch and just prior to flying, they selected pairs of birds for this purpose. I think we earned a bit of pocket money out of this business. I always carried out a gidgee and speared cobbler, flathead, etc. Plus in reefs we look for octopus and bait. There are two instances I remember about octopus. One was the day I just speared one near the wooden town jetty opposite the board office. I still had it on the end of the spear when a man came along and asked me could he have some for bait. I think he was Italian. I said, okay. He immediately took it off the end of the spear, still alive, bit it clean in half, much to my astonishment, and thanked me for before leaving. I myself can't tackle octopus for eating, simply because in those days we had very little in the way of refrigeration. Maybe a Kero fridge here and there, and there was less likelihood of getting and keeping ice. So to preserve bait, Dad used to get ockie, put it in a jar and treat it with salt and sugar, which preserved it okay. But when you're out on a boat, your stomach doesn't feel the best when he opens this one up. The other thing is that when pickled, it went a dark red type colour, much like the octopus they dish up in restaurants. That put me off more so. I also remember being pulled into the water by a speared weed groper. Now, there's no such thing as a weed groper, but when we were kids over there, you get up in the morning and the tide's low, and all these big fish are jumping along the weed banks, and we call them weed gropers. In fact, they're dusky bullwhips. They're not very good to eat either. I also remember being pulled into the water by spearing one up in the Government House bars. Well, where Government House is, it's not Government House anymore, it's a hotel or something, but just down below that on the beach was a fence, a wire fence all around with steel pickets. Apparently that used to be for the government people to swim in. Anyway, this fish, it was fairly big, and I wasn't very big at the time. It pulled me in, I lost the spear. But I came back next morning and I found it. It must have shaken it loose. It was just before my 8th birthday that Mum and Dad decided to give me my first bike. It came from Bones, where most of our stores did. All the stores and hardware, to most people, Bones used to put in containers, metal containers, and ship them over the island. This bike was a Bones Bluebird 26-inch box rim semi-racer, complete with a kerosene headlamp. It was great to explore the island road system with. Incidentally, that bike came back to Fremantle and was later converted to a girl's bike for my younger sister Margaret, and it's still under my house. Got a photo there. Unfortunately, I was to lose my elder sister Joyce when we came back in the diphtheria epidemic that hit WA at that time, after we returned home to Bicton. During the epidemic, we were subject to quarantine at home and had daily throat swabs with iodine to ward off the disease, which wasn't very pleasant. The next project was for Dad to build me a small dinghy, 6 foot long. I still have the boat and would like the Maritime Museum to take it. I've just been restoring it. Did you get that one, Terry?
Yeah. You keep going, keep going.
It's in an envelope somewhere. A friend of mine and a workmate of Dad and our family had one of these dinghies, so Dad promptly made some moulds of it and made up the new boat. It was unique in the fact that, like the normal dinghy, it is built like the normal dinghy. It's battened and ribbed with grown timber, knees and everything like that, but instead of planking on the outside, it's sheathed with a heavy canvas, which in those days they used to white lead, which we taboo now, and then put the other paint over the top. Oversized oars were cut down to about that long, and we made our own oars. This was a major step for me, learning how to scull and row, even sail with a blanket on a pole. At Christmas and Easter, the yachts from Fremantle and up Swan River sailed over for holidays. Most of these were 22-footers, like the Wangara, the Sunbeam and the Colleen. There was the Mercedes and the Velshida. They were larger boats, about 24 feet. Incidentally, the Velshida was one of the few yachts, if not the first, with Bermudian or Marconi rig, sported on a very tall mast. This was on the Swan River. In those days, most of the other yachts were gunter rig. All were fitted with bowsprits and centreboard. Because if you've got a centreboard, you can go right into the shore. If you've got a deep keel like these big boats these days, you can't. You might have to anchor in 8 feet of water or something like that. One of the nicest of these yachts was a Mercedes owned by Mr. Horace Rumble. It always reminded me of a large dinghy with a beautiful shear line. These boats usually anchored offshore and put up awnings over the spars and sails like an oblong tent. Has anybody ever seen that? Anybody ever seen the way they rig their tent up? No? Well, they just put the spars horizontal from the mast, and they're made up tent. They're square. They get the batten and they go out like that and straight down the sides, and they lace them down to the side of the yacht, which is very good. Because ice didn't last long, and it was not readily available in Rottnest, when they ran out of ice, they would hang their bottles of beer over the side, because they were all those big 26-ounce bottles, not the little stubbies you get these days, and leave them there to cool. When the bottles were empty, they were thrown over the side and floated shoreward for us boys to collect. Sometimes quite a few would sink on the way, and we would then have to dive for them. Mr. Jim... Oh, hold on. I missed the page. You staple these together in the right place. Mr. Jim Brown, the only fisheries inspector around the Fremantle area, would come into Thompson's Bay on occasion and anchor well out towards Phillip Rock. He had a nicely lined clipper bow auxiliary yacht painted white, about 30 or 35 feet long. I don't know what he did when he stayed there, but we never saw him. He stayed aboard. A newfound activity for me and some adults was that every Christmas model yacht races were held in the bay from the pilot boat jetty down to the northern end of Thompson's Bay near Bathurst Light. This was a great pastime and lasted about a week of racing with bigger and better yachts every year. The majority of people taking part in model yacht racing were from the mainland. As well as model boat racing, we also had sculling and rowing races, and this is where I excel with my new craft. The dinghy was also put to good use for collecting beer bottles. I had a real competition with another schoolboy, Eric Sinclair, who was a bit older than myself, in seeing who could collect the most bottles over summer. We had a great stack of bottles behind our house. The manager of the salt works, a Mr. Love, a big man nicknamed Tiny, took all the bottles at certain time and shipped them back to Fremantle. He gave us 5 pence a dozen because it cost a penny a dozen for freight, and you could get 6 pence on the mainland. Cool drink bottles fetched a little higher price. One afternoon I decided to take 2 of my schoolmates, the lighthouse keeper's sons, Don and Bobby Woods, out to fish in the bay in my small dinghy. At this stage I wasn't aware that they were not good swimmers. We rowed out to a large white hole in the seagrass and anchored with a lead kellic. Is everybody familiar with what a lead kellic is? It's just a block of lead actually on with a rod in the handle they used to use for dinghies when you want to anchor. On the weed around us, You could stand up with only 3 or 4 feet deep, say that's the hole where you are, and the weeds around the outside of the room. It was only 3 or 4 feet deep out there. But in the hole, it was 5 or 6 feet deep, or maybe more. It wasn't long before the fish came round after we burleyed up. I was sitting in the middle, Don the eldest sat forward and Bob sat aft. We were evenly spaced and stable when I noticed some fish come up into the burley. Naturally I said, there they are down there. With this, the 2 boys, not having much the way of boat skills, both went over the one side and that was it. Turned turtle. We're all in the drink. I was treading water with 2 boys hanging around my neck, refusing to move to the shallow water at shore. As luck would have it, Dad was on the shore in his boat. He saw what was happening because of the boys yelling and half throttling me. He sculled his boat out quickly, picked up the 2 Woods boys while I swam to the dinghy to bring it in. I think that was the first and last time I took passengers out that I didn't know how to swim properly. Bill Tickle, the baker, had a 32-foot double-ended boat called Westralia. At times Bill would sail to Fremantle for parts and stores and take along his son Des and myself. Des and I were great mates actually. At that time we could sail up the harbour, if no shipping was berthed there, in a certain area, tie up to the wharf, while Bill went uptown to do business and have a few jars with his mates. Des and I would look after the boat and maybe do a bit of fishing. Usually when Bill came back he felt a bit tired and he would go down below for a snooze when we left port. Then Des and I would sail the boat back to Rottnest, which could take up to a couple of hours depending on the breeze. By the time we sailed into the moorings at Rottnest, Bill was up and about to supervise things, and a great day was had by all. Another activity that Des and myself got up to was taking his father's dinghy out and going out to Australia's moorings to tie up behind and fish for herring in the evening. We did this, when we did this, Des's father would supply us with the day before's pies, etc. Because of the problem over there was lack of refrigeration. So we too used to take the pies and buns at times for burley. Naturally, 2 hungry boys enjoyed the burley as much as the fish when we got out there. One of the perks for the Harbour Trust and other employees living on Rottnest was that every Royal Show Day, the Trust would send the Ivanhoe over, the large wooden vessel I spoke about earlier. We would all pick up the passengers, take them to Fremantle, where the train would then take us up to the showground, and then reverse, they would bring us back, and we would all go home in the late afternoon. I can tell you, there were some hairy trips when the sou'wester came in strong and we had to go against the breeze to get home in the old Ivanhoe because it was more underwater than out. Bonfire night, November the 5th, was easily to look forward to. On the beach was built a big bonfire just north of the original town jetty and in front of the board office. This was a great spot because generally there would be a sea breeze blowing. That meant that everything that burnt blew offshore out to sea and no chance of fire or anything like that. Later in my trade, that encompassed sheet metal work, I don't know whether I'm on the right page. How did that get in there? Later in my trade, that encompassed sheet metal work, coppersmithing and tinsmithing. I repaired many lighthouse lens frames and navigation lights for the Commonwealth Department of Light. I had an offer to go building steel crowboats and also an offer to build aluminium crowboats on an axis. This offer was given to me by George Curnow, an engineer who had a workshop down the road. And it was a very good idea, because being on an axle, all the welding was downhand, you're not up underneath and all that sort of thing. And I reckon it would have gone well. But being married with young children, I tossed over it. I decided not to go into the venture at this stage, and went on looking after my family. However, with a lifetime involvement with yachting and diving and fishing, I had the opportunity to be involved in building 2 yacht clubs out of the East Fremantle Melville Club. I was apprentice at that stage, and when they pulled the trams out of Fremantle, they gave us the tram lines, which are far bigger than rail lines. They're about that deep, the web. And we used these for all the stanchions. We built a dance hall above and used them for piles going out to sea. The only trouble is in the deep water, using it for piles and the boats on them, if a boat went past, the piles had a bit of sway in them. And later on, I was with the Fremantle Sailing Club when we spent years trying to get a piece of land from the government to rebuild the club, because when they built the fishing boat harbour, they closed the slipway off to the Fremantle Sailing Club, and there was no sailing there for years because you couldn't get a boat in and out the water. Anyway, eventually we were given a choice to have a look at a site down between Bathers Beach near the South Mole, and we went down to look at it, but there was a big upheaval from the Maritime Union at that stage because they were going to bring ferries in there, and they reckoned that we couldn't build it there because it was going to interrupt all the shipping and everything. See what goes on now, a different story. Then we were given a quarter of an acre just south of the fishing boat harbour. Well, you could put a couple of slips, launch a couple of boats there, I suppose. But we knocked it back, and then eventually we got the area we got now, and I've got some photos here. And when I signed the head lease for the water when we built that. At that stage I was Commodore, so I had a bit of involvement with building those 2 clubs. If anybody is interested, one of our members, a very good member, spent about 2.5 years compiling information, and he wrote a book which is called Sailing into Success, and it's about the Fremantle Sailing Club. And it starts off from way back in 1987, I think, when this club was started, and all the way through. And he got onto a lot of the old people that were relatives of them that were still around, and it was a very good effort. Just to mention Garden Island, incidentally, I would rather be at Garden Island than Rottnest any day myself. We had much better time. As Rottnest stands now, the way it's commercialised, doesn't do anything for me at all. Just to mention Garden Island, I was taken there in the cradle too, when the sailing families used to sail over there with their families and go ashore and that. In later years, after World War II as teenagers, we ourselves sailed to the island, and Dad built me this boat here, 18-footer. We used to sail that over. At the first, we were able to use the army dugouts that they had left behind. These dugouts, some were bagged and some were cut into the hill, especially the one up the north end. You'd go down and you'd walk along, and there were bunks every side, and when you came up, there was all glass windows. You could see right out over Carnac and right to Rottnest. It was beautiful. And also, with the dugout, it was cool. The flies didn't go down there. It was really nice. But that only lasted a few years because the vandals started to come over, and that was the end of that. But later on, we built shacks there, and we had a shack at the north end for about 40 years, I think. until the Navy put paid to that, and we had to leave the island in 1979. But with those shacks being in the trade, I helped run the water. We ran the water from the old bore. There's two bores on Garden Island, one at the north end, one at the south end. We harnessed that water because it was only running out to waste all the time. And we all put in septic tanks and showers. It was a really good setup. I also had a big committee that was very active. Matter of fact, the secretary of that committee went to Canberra twice, I think, trying to get a stay to hold off the Navy project, which we did for a couple of years. There's one incident on, I mean, there are lots of incidents, but there's one particular incident that I can remember on Garden Island. It was when I was in my teens. We were over there, I think we were in a tent at that time, it was pretty early. And I went round with a gidgee in the morning, early in the morning, looking for octopus. And you go along the reef, and I went up to a place we call Cliff Head, right at the end. And I was walking around there, and there's a reef around the edge. And when I saw some teeth, I thought, you know, people use sheep's head for crowbait. Anyway, I speared this, but when I brought it up, it had gold teeth in it. So I took it back to the camp, and Dad went mad. What to bring that back for? Anyway, we took it back to Fremantle, finished up taking it to the Fremantle police, and it turned out to be sometime later, they reckon it was one of the army personnel that came from Queensland, and I believe that wasn't the only one that happened like that. So it's an easy way of getting rid of somebody, I think. But I didn't find anything else but the lower jaw with the teeth. Yeah.
So is that your story, Norm?
That's all except a few boats. I was going to show here. Where was it? Incidentally, that's another one of Dad's boats. He had a few more than this too. That's the one he won the Mandurah Cup with in 1924. But see this boat here? What do you reckon that is? It's the same boat. They used to lend their boats to some of their friends. He lent this boat actually to one of his workmates, and his workmate took it over Garden Island with his family. They were camping there, and Dad was working. He said that a particular day. He said, I don't think the boys will go out today. And this chap took the boat out, and he went out behind Karnak and copped a big dumb breaker. 2 people were drowned.
It looks like a fully rigged 18-footer.
Yeah, but it's 24 feet.
24 feet,
Yeah.
So
Oh, I've got a photo of the original Mealy Bilo at home, not the one in the museum, the original one. Because this one in the museum was a bit of a dud. Yeah. There's plenty of sail, and sometimes they carried a water sail underneath there too. I don't know how they carried it, but they did.
Well, I think we've just about run out of time, Norm.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's all right, but we better wind it up, I think. I'd like to thank you very much for your very interesting story and your growing up in those early days in Fremantle and Rottnest.
Oh, it was
and a
good.
little
I can
story
remember a lot
about
more, but it was very
Garden
good.
Island as well. It's not our local history, unfortunately, but we couldn't find a local story for tonight, and Norm sort of filled in. We normally try and confine our speakers to sort of something in this area, but you're rather an exception,
Yeah, I got
Norm.
on to my son-in-law. He's a sculptor. He lives at Sawyers Valley.
No,
He knows all about this too.
We try to keep it local.
Pardon? Yeah, well, one of my cousins sailed at the Mayland Yacht Club.
Norm, there was an incident, well, not an incident, but two Maylands fellows went to work on Rottnest Island just before World War II, and their name was Reed, and you'll remember them.
Oh, I didn't mention them. I know them well. Yeah.
They lived in Central Avenue. One lived in Central Avenue in just near the corner of East Street, and the other lived in Peninsula Road, just near the corner of East Street as well. Those two brothers lived for many years and worked and drove the trucks and so on Rottnest Island while you would have been
Actually, I know you're out of time, but I took my fiancée to Rottnest about 1948, and we stayed at Bill Reed's place for a week. And we walked right around the island with this camera taking photos. And when I got back, it was on time exposure.
You mentioned collecting bottles.
Yeah.
The old King Brown, as they used to call them in those days.
Yeah.
But Bill Reed's son, Peter, who lived just around the corner from us, he came back from Rottnest when World War II broke out, and he had £120, which was a fortune. It was nearly enough to buy a block of land or...
That's right, yeah.
In those days. And he was only a boy of about 10 years of age, I think.
Yeah, I remember them.
And he had I know we went over there and stayed with him a few times. He had quite a big cart, and he used to go around all the bungalows collecting the beer bottles, as you did as well.
Yeah.
But he came back, he had more money than any other young fellow in the area.
Yeah,
But look, we won't go on because it's got pretty late. Thank you very much, Norm, for a very interesting talk. And thank you for joining me.
You could hear me, could you? Oh, I'm a bit worried here. Okay.
Say what it is.
Say when you're ready. I'll now give you a demonstration of Tipcat. And I missed it.
You better show them the little model boats you sailed as well while you're there.
All the kids used to make these. Unless you can get Mum to make a cloth sail, or just to get a bit of flat packing case. We wouldn't do that if it's not a smooth. We'd get a pocket knife or something and go over it, and just get the straps around the old wooden packing cases. We used to break a bit of that off and stick in there. Yeah, they go well.
They really jump across
They
the
fly, don't they? Yeah.